evening and welcome to the American Museum of Ceramic Art. My name is Beth Ann Gerstein and I'm the Executive Director of AMOCA. Thank you for that. And thanks for joining us this evening.
Your family here.
I do, clearly. So many people have asked why we organize We the People Serving Notice. Over the years, museums have been charged with communicating and preserving cultural values through their exhibitions and through their collections. I think most of us would agree that the current political and social climate is arguably one of the most divisive and turbulent periods in our time. We felt now, more than ever, that we wanted to provide a platform for artists to reflect on what was happening in their communities and in society. Through their artwork, artists have the opportunity to encourage contemplation, conversation, and/or action on some of the most important issues of our lifetime. We believe that artists and art play an important role in galvanizing our society to do better and to encourage change. With that said, AMOCA invited 80 artists from across the country to serve notice on a range of current issues. We organized the exhibition into 8 major areas. The first section is Political Divide. The Democratic Cup project was launched before the 2016 election as a slow activism project that uses handmade cups to encourage person-to-person civil conversations about social and political issues. The Democratic Cup artists believe that these cups will act as agents of social change by generating positive political discourse over a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Featured here is Bell Hooks and Sojourner Truth Cup. This cup was a collaboration between ceramic artist Roberto Lugo and Kristen Kiefer. Lugo wrote that when he was designing this cup...
Sorry.
Lugo wrote that when he was designing this cup, he was considering the 2016 election. He was thinking about all the progress that had been made to elect a black president and nominate a female candidate for president. You can't make this stuff up. He wanted to recognize 2 women who he held especially dear, Sojourner Truth and Bell Hooks. Kiefer wrote that she was interested in the idea of founding mothers and the desire to celebrate the women who got us here. The illustration on the cups, front and back, are featured here, are 2 of the strong African-American female activists, Sojourner Truth, who was born in 1797 and passed away in 1883, and Bell Hooks, who was born in 1952 and is still with us. They fought for suffrage, emancipation, and equality. Kiefer and Lugo hope that their cup will spotlight the ongoing need for racial and gender equality and women's rights, as well as the importance and tenacity of minorities in the United States. On the other hand, Wesley Anderegg feels that things have deteriorated so much and no one is listening to each other. Each side thinks they are 100% correct, and in the end, all we hear are blah, 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 which is painted around the edge of this platter. The environmental topic is the largest segment of this exhibition, maybe because we're all personally impacted by it, particularly in Southern California. The world scientists seem to be in agreement that the need for a debate about the causes of climate change is long over. You may know that 153 nation states signed the Paris Climate Agreement last year. The agreement states that climate change is occurring, human activity is a major cause, and it's going to get worse in the future, and strong global action is needed before it's too late. A little over 2 months ago, President Trump announced that the United States would withdraw from the agreement. Jessica Brandel piece is based on the extinction of the passenger pigeons. The passenger pigeons once numbered in the billions and seemed inexhaustible. They were slaughtered as cheap food sources, and industrialization led to their extinction around 1914. The story behind this piece is about a specific passenger pigeon named Buttons. As the story goes, a young boy in Ohio shot an unknown bird. When he brought it home, his mother identified the bird as a passenger pigeon. And since the species had not been seen for many years, the family had the bird stuffed by the local sheriff's wife and part-time taxidermist. While preparing the passenger pigeon for mounting, the taxidermist didn't have any eyes left for the bird and used black shoe buttons instead. Brandel points out that this story of the last of something taken from the wild and given shoe buttons for eyes resonates as a Greek tragedy brimming with pathos. Stan Welsh's piece, Stan Welsh is featured here. Stan Welsh believes that the planet Earth is a garden and that reckless human behavior is destroying that garden. As the planet warms, water has become a central character and is displacing people. The ceramic figure on the left is being overwhelmed and dominated by the waves and water. Welsh is paying homage to our precarious and tenuous relationship with nature. Gender identity describes how you feel and can differ from the anatomy that you were born with. Sexuality refers to people's sexual interest in and attraction to others, such as heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, or lesbian. This section of the exhibition includes artwork that explores reproductive justice, masculinity and femininity, gender roles, and what it means to identify as both queer and as an artist. Wesley Harvey's work is featured here. Wesley is a homosexual man who feels that it's important to keep the dialogue open and progressing on topics of LGBTQ and gender equality. In his fantasy three-way, he wants to pay homage to two of his idols and mentors, Howard Cotler and Mark Burns. Cotler, featured in the middle, frequently used the image of Thomas Gainsborough's Blue Boy, which is the small insert on the right, in his artwork to reference himself. Harvey thought it was important to appropriate this iconic and kitsch image to help examine a homosexual lineage in ceramics. Howard Cotler, Mark Burns, and Harvey became the Blue Boys, with Cotler being the biggest Blue Boy. Harvey feels that Cotler and Burns paved the way for him and gave him the confidence to continue their legacy and further his artwork. Nicole, just lost her name. Gugliotti artwork is a stigma surrounding abortion in the United States. People who have had abortions are cast as villains, victims, but rarely as heroes of their own narrative. The inspiration for this piece came from one of her friends who shared her experience with abortion. The friend shared her lack of insecurity in her decision, although her experience was not without hesitation or complication. The friend's confidence came from a solid place of knowing that she was entitled to her humanity and control over her body. Gugliotti hopes that that would be the norm instead of the exception. She likes to use real-life stories in her work to offer alternatives to the dominant narrative and a model for how making informed, empowered, and stigma-free healthcare decisions could and should be. The authors of the Declaration of Independence outlined a bold vision for America, a nation in which we, the people, would be both free and equal. More than 200 years later, this vision has yet to be fully realized. Roberto Lugo fell in love with a century vase during an undergraduate art history course on ceramics. The one featured on the right is from the Brooklyn Museum in New York and is from the late 1800s. Lugo was impressed by its grandeur, design, imagery, and connection to the community it represented and the story it told. Lugo currently uses the century vase concept as a way to connect 100 years of specific history. This piece, entitled A Century of Black Lives Mattering, aims to pay homage to the lost lives of Black men who suffered from police brutality. Neuenschwander's sculpture depicts a skirt of broken commemorative plates that include early slave owners to more recent Ku Klux Klan members from our all-male presidents. The figure wears a spike-studded dog-like collar, and in one hand she holds a small tack. Below her skirt is a sledgehammer to be used metaphorically to solve all the problems. We know some men and presidents who are always looking for a sledgehammer to crack a peanut. War is the basis for much of the world's history. 50 years ago, during the Vietnam War, there were 2.7 million conscripted men. Today, less than half of 1% of the US population is in the armed services. the lowest rate since before World War II. America's recent wars were authorized by Congress, whose members have the lowest rate of military service in history, led by 4 successive commanders-in-chief, which include Clinton, W. Bush, Obama, Trump, none of which have served on active duty. The effects of war, both physically and mental injuries, are often devastating for military personnel and their families. Putnam Phillips served in the military. She combines images of servicewomen in combat on decorative tableware to create a contemporary social commentary on war. She seeks to challenge society's ideals of domesticity and gender roles while exposing the social and cultural issues faced by military women. Jesse Albright was on his way to his art class when he saw a plane fly into the World Trade Center in 2001 in New York City. 3 semesters later, he was in Iraq, deployed with the Iowa National Guard as a medic. Unfortunately, they forgot to give him his aid bag or to issue the ceramic plates called SAPI, S-A-P-I, which is a small arms protective insert for his body armor to stop bullets. Albright didn't have the clay that would stop bullets when he was in Iraq, but he said ceramic saved him. Not in a way that makes you feel warm and fuzzy, but in his words, more of a choking, sobbing, suicide night terror, overdose, homeless kind of way that isn't pretty. This is his SAPI plate. Except for Native Americans, we are a nation of immigrants, yet the immigration debate has been on the table for over a century, with generations of policymakers debating the economic, humanitarian, and security concerns of immigration. President Trump recently signed an executive order affecting immigrant entry, border security, enforcement, and refugees. Now more than ever, we need new workable policy reform. Christina Iribs has been using teeth in her work as a symbol for people. In Mexico, it is thought that if you dream about losing a tooth, it's a premonition that someone close to you will pass on soon. This piece represents her parents' immigration from Mexico to the United States. Thinking of their stories and emotional storm, she imagined the smoke turning into dark rain clouds, then calming into a new home with the daily rituals, thus the steam in the cup of coffee. The rain doubles as tears pouring down the plate. The egg is a symbol for life, and the heart is a symbol of unconditional love and happiness associated with home and family. Featured here is Beth Lowe's work, which revolves primarily around issues of family and her Asian American background. Since the birth of her son in 1987, she has been drawing inspiration from major events in her family's history, parenting and her own child memories of being raised in a minority culture in the United States. She uses the image of the child as a symbol of innocence, potential, and vulnerability. She made this piece in response to President Trump's immigration policy and the general lack of dignity, consideration, and respect that has been part of his administration. Using her good child iconography, welcome, which is the translation, is meant to show positive, generous behavior towards people of other races and cultures. She hopes her tray to be welcomed in a home, for table, for service, for any kind of food, to evoke a message of goodwill and camaraderie. Money buys power and creates corruption. It impacts our news, politics, economics, and foreign policy. Our system grants special exemptions and influence to corporations and extremely wealthy, which has led to public distrust and fearfulness that our democracy is corroding. Elliot Kaiser's piece, he built this piece to address the changing landscape of America's farmland and the effect that capitalism is having on our decisions. The sculpture is of a fistulated bovine. This is a technique of inserting a porthole-like device where you can actually see into the stomach of the cow. It was originally organized to help understand which foods were better to feed the cows. Kaiser's cow is filled with candy corn. For those of you who don't know, candy corn is made only of corn syrup, food coloring, and preservatives. Exhibition viewers are invited to reach inside the cow sculpture for a piece of candy corn and contemplate their role as a consumer as the cow is literally and metaphorically feeding them. Hattie Warshina's Kimchi Chaos is a sake set with an exploding tray. A sake ewer in the form of Kim Jong-un and nuclear missile cups. This piece was made in 2013 and could easily have applied to recent tweets. Warshina has also always been angered by the actions and craziness of politicians and world leaders. An example, for years, Kim Jong-il and then his son, Kim Jong-un, have been flaunting North Korea's military and nuclear capacity by blatantly launching missiles in order to intimidate their adversaries in Asia as well as the US. This chest beating and bullying by those leaders was the inspiration for this piece. Joan Takeyamogawa's piece uses the beauty and artisanry of Japanese sushi to parody the absurdities of American culture. Each piece of sushi delivers a political morsel, such as the tarp save banks, oil which floods the market for geopolitical motives, pollution which makes raw fish toxic, and topping it all off with a strong wasabi dollar which destabilizes the world currencies. Quiet piece here by Tim Berg and Rebecca Myers. This piece is inspired by The Life of Washington, a book written in 1800 by Mason Locke Weems. It was one of the earliest biographies on our first president. The cherry tree tale that we all know from Washington's youth doesn't make an appearance until the 5th edition of the book, 6 years later. This is probably one of the stories that most people know about Washington. They may not know or understand Washington's entire life and impact on the United States, but if they understand the cherry tree story, they feel that they can understand Washington and get to be American and participate in the country that he helped create. These stories may be true, partially true, or completely fabricated. These stories shape the way we view our leaders and our nation. In 1799, which was right before he wrote the story, Weems told his publisher that the public was primed for a good story. Some things never change. Donald Trump is a billionaire. Donald Trump is a television personality. Donald Trump is a businessman, and now Donald Trump is the 45th president of the United States. At 70 years old, Trump became the oldest and wealthiest person ever to assume the presidency, the first without prior military or government service, and the 5th to have won the election despite losing the popular vote. The work in this section challenges the Trump administration head-on. Seth Rainville remembers that as a young boy during the Cold War, there were fire drills and nuclear emergency drills. He thought that the threat of nuclear war would be stories that he would tell to his kids and grandkids. He assumed they were past all that we were past all that. Last fall, he said he was elated to know that his daughters would be growing up in a world where they would have only known a black president and a woman president. It turns out he was wrong, and the words of his oldest daughter played over and over in his head, "Daddy, why did that bad man win?" He created this piece to try and process everything that happened since the election. He feels that he wants to do something, say something. Rainville said, "Advocacy through art is perhaps my only device, so I will continue to make work which will most assuredly change as quickly as the news cycle." Zach Tate's piece tackles the dire subject of education in America. Education Secretary, the title of the piece, features Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos. Tate feels that DeVos is so comically underqualified, marred with controversy and conflicts of interest, that she is the character representation for the absurdity, aloofness, and ignorance that the Trump administration has embodied in dealing with such serious subjects. Clayton Bailey. Finally, Clayton Bailey. It says it all. It expresses the nation that we should it expresses the notion that we should demand clear thinking and adherence to the truth. The platter says, "Let us remember what's his name, the liar." The inscriptions will remind the viewer of one who lies, defy facts, and are harmful to mankind. Bailey shows his contempt for the liar by removing all aesthetics and craftsmanship from this ceramic message. We hope the work and statements of We the People, will inspire you to reflect on your history, feelings, and experiences, and that you will participate in serving notice. Now is the opportune time to stand up, speak out, and serve notice. We invite you to make a postcard in the education space. Those postcards will be mailed to officials after the end of the exhibition. You can also download a guide on the We the People page on the website. It'll be available Tuesday on how to reach your representatives on any of the topics discussed here today. Before I introduce our next speaker, I would like to thank everyone who helped make this exhibition possible. The artists that are in the room, that are in the show, if you could please stand up so that they know who's participating. Kirk Delman's already standing up. I would also like to thank Ted and Lyda Urban and the LA Arts Commission who generously funded this exhibition. Andrea Rubino, America Museum of Ceramic Arts, exhibition manager and designer extraordinaire. Hannah Fountain, our Wingate curatorial intern and superlative wordsmith. Sarah Hunsucker, AMOCA's education director with support from Jasmine David, who's our Getty undergraduate multicultural intern from Pomona College. They did a great job developing the education area of the exhibition. David Armstrong, AMOCA's founder, and his right-hand man, Oscar, who built and installed the exhibition. And I would also like to thank the great Tortilla Conspiracy team, who also created the Trump Tower in the exhibition for their participation tonight. The proceeds from the sale of the tortillas will help support AMOCA's exhibition programs. And last but not least, I would like to thank all of the AMOCA staff, board of directors, members, and donors. We appreciate your support year-round to help us do what we do here. So thank you. And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Neela Freese. She was born in Dublin, Ireland, moved to the United States as a young adult. In her late 30s, she took her first clay class at an art center in Boston that I happened to be running about 30 years ago, and was seduced by clay. Haven't most of the people in this room? In 1999, she earned her BFA with high distinction from California College for the Arts, and since then her work has been exhibited both nationally and internationally, in Korea, Finland, France, Hungary, and Ireland. She has received many awards for her work, which is represented in both private and public collections. For the past few years, she's been working on a collection of ceramic figures for the Internet Archive in San Francisco. I think she's going to be showing some images of that. And her work has been included in many books, such as Ceramics and the Human Figure by Edith Garcia and Confrontational Ceramics by Judith Schwartz. In fact, she's on the cover of that book. And please join me in welcoming Neela Freese.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming, and thank you Beth Ann for giving me this opportunity. And I hope you can hear me, because I have a quiet voice. But so in 2002, I was invited to make an ornament for the White House Christmas tree. And while I was honored to be invited, I was not a supporter of our president then, George W. Bush. I was concerned about his willingness to go to war in Iraq. I did, however, make the ornament and even went to the White House to a party for the artists. And when I came back home to California, I made the birds that I wished I could have sent the president. And this is one of them, where the beak has turned into a weapon. And the birds that I made were titled Presidential Squadron, and they carried bombs and guns and machine guns and wore Arab headdress and cowboy hats. That was probably the top seller. Anyway, that as the war progressed, morphed into my work, Babes in Arms. And with this, I'm concerned about the message we are passing on, the values to the children of the world. Babies are sweet and precious. But these babies have to carry with them lethal weapons that may well one day be their future. They need the protection of hard hats and gas masks. And some of them are carrying weapons that are ridiculously oversized, and that reflects the world's arsenal of increased weaponry. The rationale is that that keeps us safe, which is a deadly paradox. Lament for Fukushima. This addresses the socio-political issue and environmental issue of nuclear power. With this piece, I'm using the Japanese technique of raku firing. Here the baby Buddha, who represents Japan, sits not under a tree, but under a mushroom cloud, and his eyes bleed for the disaster that's befallen Fukushima and the Japanese people. Mea culpa. I grew up in Ireland, and I lived there till I was 24. I was keenly aware of the omnipresence of the Catholic Church in Ireland at the time. This piece, Mea culpa, addresses corruption in the Catholic Church. Mea culpa is Latin for through my fault. It is part of the Catholic Mass. It is said by the priests and the congregation together for atonement for their sins. But here, the young altar boy is looking for forgiveness for something that has happened to him, that he knows is wrong. He blames himself for the abuse inflicted on him, as is common with young children. He wears the bishop's hat, and that symbolizes the real sinners. I showed this piece in a traveling show in Ireland, and there was a lot of controversy. There was big issues over this work. Trust. Here we have two children reading together from the same book, and they represent very different cultures, yet they are friends. The children both have deep-rooted history that entangle the white dove of peace. I made this piece for an exhibit for Ambassador Stevens, who died tragically in Benghazi in Libya, 2012. Cones of shame. The politician, the lobbyist, and the patriot are a response to the hypocrisy of our political leaders who claim concern for people while looking out for their own short-term interest and at the expense of the environment and others. The banker is pleased with the election results. It's a response to the greed and indifference of Wall Street. Here the banker has nothing to fear, as he has both political parties in his pocket. Boys will be girls. These figures were originally inspired by my 5 years of living in the Castro in San Francisco. The boldness of the drag queens, along with the uninhibited spirit I encountered there, impressed me. There are memories of characters that I've met or seen in a crowd or on the street. They're the quirky, awkward people at a party. They're imbued with the spirit of the Castro, the courage to be oneself regardless of the consequences. Trans teapot. I'm using the ubiquitous teapot as a polite entry point to introduce the conversation of transgender people and their plight, especially these days. A bad hombre and tweeting twit. The next two slides represent the president and his cabinet with their extreme views and the vehemence they project. Mr. Trump, with his larger-than-life ego, cannot control his urge to tweet in the middle of the night. It's ridiculous that a leader of the most powerful country in the world is behaving this way, and that he shows such a lack of compassion. The crown he wears is a reference to the white supremacist advisors and many of his supporters. The fact that the crown looks like a dunce's cap is no accident. This is my piece in the show here, the butterfly effect. Many are familiar with the concept of the butterfly effect, the idea that a butterfly flapping its wings somewhere in the Amazon can cause a chain of events that eventually cause a hurricane in another part of the world is a metaphor used in science to explain chaos theory. How small events can lead to big outcomes. It has been embraced by popular culture. It helps us understand that everything is connected. What affects one affects us all. And here I'm wondering what the effect will be when there are no butterflies left in the Amazon to flap their wings. The EPA is under threat from the Trump administration. This is something that should concern us all. We see the effects of global warming around the world on a daily basis. Rather than cutting the EPA by 40%, the US needs to increase funding and double it. The threat the administration poses and the hideous amount of reversal to progressive policies is bewildering and alarming. But the cuts to the EPA may be suicidal in the long term. Scientists warn of the cost of these cuts, not that Mr. Trump is listening. The Ceramic Archivist. This is an ongoing commission that I have for the Internet Archive in San Francisco. I am archiving the employees of the Internet Archive in clay. The archive is a digital library. Its mission statement is universal access to all knowledge. It provides free public access to collections of digitized materials, including websites, software, games, movies, moving images, and nearly 3 million books in the public domain. Recently, scientists are using the archive to archive their websites and materials that they're concerned that the Trump administration may want the public to forget about. In fact, Brewster Kahle, the founder of the archive, is so concerned about this administration that he's making a backup of everything connected to the archive in Canada. When I started this commission, I didn't see it as political, but with this administration, the Internet Archive has become more political as it strives to save important knowledge for our use and for future use. It also has a Trump archive where one can clearly reference everything that he may want us to forget about him. It includes over 500 videos, statements, fact-checked by factcheck.org, Political Fact, and the Washington Post fact checker, covering such controversial topics as immigration, Trump's tax returns, Hillary Clinton emails, and health care. To date, I have made 126 people that's in the permanent collection. And I want to thank everyone for being here.
Thank you, Neela. finally, I'd like to introduce Courtney Madison. Courtney was born and raised in San Francisco and recently moved to Los Angeles. She holds a BA in Marine Biology and Ceramic Sculpture from Skidmore College in New York, and an MA in Environmental Studies from Brown University in Rhode Island. Madison's work has been exhibited in various solo and group exhibitions, including Fired Up, Monumental Clay at the Palo Alto Art Center in California, and Sea Change at the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Madison's work has been featured in Smithsonian Magazine, Science Magazine, and Colossal, as well as other prominent international science, art, and culture publications. Please join me in welcoming Courtney Madison.
I just want to start by thanking Beth and thanking AMOCA for inviting me to be part of this exhibition. It's really impressive, and I'm really inspired by all the artworks included and the causes they represent. My cause in basically all of my work is protecting the ocean. Life on Earth wouldn't be possible without water. Water is what we look for when we're searching for other planets that might be as hospitable as Earth is to life. As renowned oceanographer and National Geographic Society explorer in residence, Dr. Sylvia Earle says, "No water, no life, no blue, no green." She is also fond of saying, without water, we'd have a planet a lot like Mars. The ocean, which covers over 70% of Earth's surface, connects us all, from the deep mesophotic reefs of the Philippines to the icy peaks of the Rocky Mountains. And because we're all connected to the ocean, our actions, the carbon dioxide we emit, the materials we waste, the fish we eat, all have an impact on it, no matter where these actions occur. I deeply believe that art can help shape our path towards more wholehearted actions and policies for marine conservation. I combine my background in marine conservation biology with my other in ceramic sculpture to try to inspire social change, policy change, and translate concepts from environmental science into aesthetically stimulating forms and sculptural installations. Coral reefs have captivated my imagination for as long as I can remember. I'm happiest when the exotic forms and vibrant colors and often venomous appendages of the animals that inhabit a tropical reef dance in the window of my scuba mask as I slowly hover above, or in this case behind. This Napoleon wrasse is named Wally. I love coral reefs for the mysteries that they hold and for the tiny plant-like animals that are the faceless architects of some of the world's largest living organisms, like the Great Barrier Reef, which is visible from space, the turquoise specks kind of lining the northeast coast of Australia. Corals are so sensitive that the slightest change to the temperature or the chemistry of the seawater that surrounds them can cause widespread devastation through coral bleaching, which occurs when corals become stressed by rising sea temperatures caused by climate change, resulting from our fossil fuel use and greenhouse gas emissions that trap heat within our atmosphere. Corals stressed by warming sea temperatures lose their symbiotic algae that are called zooxanthellae, or symbiodinium, that live inside their tissues and normally photosynthesize to provide food for them, causing their coral hosts to starve. Corals can recover from bleaching and reverse the process by being recolonized by these symbiodinium, but bleaching can also lead to coral death, algal domination, and reef erosion, not to mention the gradual destruction of a complex hideout for countless fish and invertebrate species that live among the corals, sort of like a city going bankrupt and letting its buildings fall apart. In addition to climate change, ocean acidification, overfishing, and land-based sources of pollution are among the most prominent threats to coral reefs and the ocean as a whole. And we have a lot to lose if coral reefs crash. A 2014 study by Robert Costanza, who's a professor at Australia National University, found that coral reefs are worth $11 trillion worldwide, largely for the ecosystem services that they provide, like tourism, food, coastline protection. Without our help to eliminate the pressure we put on reefs, leading researchers agree that nearly 100% of coral reefs could be in a rapid and terminal decline by the year 2050 and may lose their ecological functionality by the end of this century. And I know that sounds really doom and gloom, but there is still hope, and we may still be able to turn things around for coral reefs. A report published this year in the journal Nature suggested that Australia could help save the Great Barrier Reef by creating policies that focus on science, protection, and conservation to combat climate change. We can save reefs and ocean ecosystems around the globe by reducing stressors that impact them, namely by switching from fossil fuels to renewable energy, limiting coastal pollution and development, and drastically decreasing our appetites for marine wildlife to stop overfishing. Through my artwork, like this piece here that's in the exhibition called Catch of the Day, my goal is to highlight these facts, sometimes playfully, and empower viewers to feel hopeful and act while we still can, while recognizing these threats. I think that art can go beyond showing us scientific evidence or revealing an environmental problem. It can also make us care and act to protect. The first time we saw a photograph of Earth from space sparked this kind of feeling, an understanding of our home, our connectedness, and how tiny, fragile, and special life is. We protect what we care about, and we care about what we know and understand. Some of you might believe that art and science are really unrelated fields, and that artists have little use for numbers and fabricate things that don't exist in the real world conceptually, while scientists develop complex theories about the world using data and computer models. And there's kind of an ivory tower mentality about the connections between art and science that have caused them to grow apart in really what I think are unnatural ways. They're often isolated from one another, avoiding chances to start conversations within society at large. But I'm part of a growing community with historic roots working to reconnect science and art, or what I call sci-art. Art and science are two ways in which humanity explores and explains the world. Artists and scientists actually have a lot in common. They thrive on a shared sense of curiosity about the world and work to form a better understanding of it. One of my favorite historical examples of this is Ernst Haeckel, a German biologist and naturalist and artist who coined the terms ecology and stem cell, but is best known for his biological illustrations of sea creatures and other organisms, many of which popularized the work of Charles Darwin. Not all artists care about science and vice versa, but both artists and scientists use creativity to come up with solutions to questions about the world, often developing meticulous techniques to achieve answers to these questions. Not only are art and science intrinsically related, they're powerful. One example from 1977 is relevant to California and Los Angeles in particular. California's snowpack reached an all-time low, and the city of LA began taking too much water from the streams that fed Mono Lake in the Sierras, leaving the lake's water level to steadily decline. A group of environmentalists filed a lawsuit to save Mono Lake from drying up, but they couldn't compete with the city's attorneys and PR firms that were intent on designating that water for the city. The activists were idealistic and lacked funding, sort of a tale as old as time in California. But then an artist named Deborah Small had an idea. She delivered handmade, limited edition porcelain bricks to the offices of city and state officials involved in the fight. Each brick, part of Deborah Small's bathroom site project, was decorated with clever images about the need to save Mono Lake and instructions to place the brick in the water tank of a toilet to displace and thereby conserve a portion of water in each tank. A quote on the bricks read, "One brick in every Los Angeles toilet tank could save Mono Lake, yet it is so much cheaper to destroy it. For the sake of that illusion, the crystal world shatters." These bricks sat on the desks of these officials, catching their attention and ultimately launching a series of statewide hearings with LA water officials led by Huey Johnson, the head of California's Resources Agency at the time. The hearings got lots of public attention, and the resulting public trust case was a success, with the court ordering LA to stop taking water from a stream critical to Mono Lake. In 2007, when I was in college, a piece came out in Orion magazine by Eric Reese that quoted Sam Bauer, who's an environmentalist and artist and the founder of the Green Museum. And he says, "Art has a job to do." And I agree. Art combined with science can help us visualize a problem and figure out ways to solve it. With this belief, I have kind of formed a career as a sci artist and an artivist for the ocean, to bring threats to ocean health above the surface and into view. This is a photo of me on a scissor lift putting finishing touches on my very first large-scale ceramic sculptural coral reef installation called Our Changing Seas in Washington, D.C. in 2011. This piece was the culmination of my master's thesis in environmental studies at Brown University, where I combined coursework in marine conservation, science, and policy with coursework in the ceramic studio at RISD next door. It debuted in 2011 in the lobby of the Herbert C. Hoover Building, which is the downtown Washington, D.C. headquarters of the Department of Commerce and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. My goal with this piece, it was my first large-scale work, so there was lots of troubleshooting to do. But once I figured it out, my goal was to inspire awareness and policy change for coral reef conservation. And the piece and the series that has resulted from it, which I'm still continuing, celebrate the exotic beauty of coral reefs while highlighting the human-caused threats that they face, namely climate change, ocean acidification, overfishing, and land-based pollution. My Our Changing Seas series has grown a lot in the last 6 years, and I'm currently working on my 4th and 5th installations for the series. This is the 3rd, Our Changing Seas 3, which debuted in 2014 at the Tang Museum at Skidmore College, which is my alma mater. It explores the rapid transition that corals throughout the tropics and subtropics are making from healthy, colorful, and diverse to sickened and bleached as a result of climate change, which is putting coral reefs in the proverbial eye of the storm. At its heart, the piece celebrates my favorite aesthetic aspects of a healthy, diverse, colorful coral reef, kind of surrounded by the sterile white skeletons of bleached corals swirling like the rotating winds of a cyclone. As I mentioned before, it's possible for corals to recover from bleaching if the stressor, the temperature, gets back to normal quickly enough. So I want the viewer to be able to interpret the piece either optimistically or pessimistically, swirling inward or outward. Our Changing Seas 3 has toured around the country a bit, and I'm thrilled at how people of all ages respond to it, especially students. It's really fun to talk to kids about this stuff. So I'll show you a little bit about my building process. For Our Changing Seas 3, I started with a sketch and I began building. I built pieces on the floor of my studio to map out the work and create a plan for how different sections would be installed to fit around one another like a puzzle. I really wanted to convey a sense of swirling, floating motion in the work. So as I built each piece in relation to its neighbors, I continued forms and directions from one to the next. So I coil build hollow forms from a nice gritty, bulky stoneware clay and hand sculpt each branch, mound, and texture by hand. And I use simple tools like chopsticks and paintbrushes for most of it. often poking thousands of holes to mimic the repetitive growth of coral colonies. I listen to lots of NPR and podcasts. In the ocean, individual coral polyps precipitate calcium carbonate from seawater to form stony skeletons that over time grow atop one another to compose the vast, complex structures that we know as reefs. It feels essential that the medium of my work be ceramic because calcium carbonate also happens to be a common glaze ingredient. And it almost goes without saying that brittle porcelain anemone tentacles and coral branches break really easily if improperly handled, similar to the delicate bodies of living coral reef organisms. Upon glazing and firing each piece, I reassembled them at each step of the process on the floor in my studio. And once every piece is finished, often hundreds of them in each installation, the pieces are packed onto crates to ship out for installation. This is at the Palo Alto Art Center last year. Another of my more recent works is called Aqueduct. It's a playful yet ominous exploration of sea level rise and species migrations caused by climate change, with hundreds of porcelain and stoneware corals, anemones, sponges, and other marine invertebrates kind of spilling into the gallery from a hand-carved porcelain air duct register. It explores the question of what might happen when climate change causes tropical sea creatures to migrate towards the poles and invade terrestrial spaces as seawater warms and sea levels rise, while begging another question: will we act urgently to halt climate change and keep the ocean in its place, or will we allow the sea to consume us? Another series I've been playing with is called Fossil Fuels, inspired by the impacts of fossil fuel use on coral bleaching. These are all free-form, hand-sculpted. I don't use molds. And they're mostly true to scale, although the oil drum is only about 24 inches tall. They're made of stoneware and porcelain. One other new project that I'm excited about, which I'm in the middle of working on, is a community-based project in Bali, Indonesia, being commissioned by a non-governmental organization called the Coral Triangle Center. The Coral Triangle Center, or CTC, is working with an international team of architects, exhibit designers, artists, nonprofits, and donors to create a CTC Center for Marine Conservation in Sanur, Bali, which will serve as kind of an education center for local and tourist visitors and kind of a hub for marine conservation in the region. They invited me to work as the lead artist to design and lead a team to create a 25-meter long and 2.5-meter tall ceramic coral reef installation, celebrating the beauty and diversity of reefs of the Coral Triangle, which is really mecca for coral nerds. It's the epicenter of marine biodiversity in the ocean, and it's often called the Amazon of the sea. And I'm so proud to be part of this project, and I'll be going back to Bali in a few weeks. They've already built hundreds of pieces, and when I return, I'll lead a glazing workshop and meet with the architect and contractors to kind of finalize our mounting methods for how everything will go up on the wall. It's going to be almost 3,000 different pieces, so installation could take a while, and I'll be there most of December doing that. And I should also mention, it's just really great to work with so many local artists and volunteers, because there are lots of people that have never touched clay before or have never been swimming, much less diving, and seen a coral reef. So it's really amazing to have these conversations as everyone's working. Finally, I'll just mention that I'm also working with an amazing nonprofit organization here in California called Mission Blue, which was founded by a famous oceanographer, the National Geographic Society Explorer in Residence that I mentioned earlier, named Dr. Sylvia Earle, who won the TED Prize in 2009 for ocean conservation advocacy work and was given a chance to make a wish. So in response, she said, "I wish you would use all means at your disposal, films, the web, expeditions, new submarines, a campaign, to ignite public support for a network of global marine protected areas hope spots large enough to save and restore the ocean, the blue heart of the planet. So I really took this idea to heart and decided to use all skills at my disposal to make a difference. And I think that the idea that we should all do what we can uniquely do to help the cause that we care most about is a really powerful one. And art has a big way to help with that. So for me, it's all about raising awareness and inspiring action by creating the work I do. And I feel like I'm just getting started. So I hope that this work will continue to grow and change and inspire greater levels of support for ocean conservation. And I'm really excited to continue to follow the work of all the other artists in this exhibition as they kind of serve notice for their causes as well. So thank you.
Courtney and Neela for speaking here tonight, and I want to thank all of you for joining us, and I invite you all into the galleries where you can see the rest of the show and have an opportunity to talk to some of the artists. Elliot Kaiser, whose bovine peas feed we talked about earlier, has arrived as well, so come join us, have a tortilla, and serve notice. Thanks for coming.